Guys, my name is Dan Lanir. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success at OPSWAT. OPSWAT, where our motto is, trust no file, trust no device. And in this session right now, I'm going to talk to you about trust files and how they pertain to isolated networks. So protecting isolated networks from content-based threats. Content-based threats being threats found in files. Does anybody know what an isolated network is? You guys know what an isolated network is? Anybody work with isolated networks? Isolated networks are networks that are not attached to the internet. They're not attached to other networks. They're isolated to stay secure. They're isolated so that data can't infiltrate in or infiltrate out. What's a common situation where you would have an isolated network? Well, typically you have isolated networks in like critical infrastructures, right? Infrastructures where the data is very sensitive or where the data can be used in very have very negative impacts if it's used in an incorrect way. So for example, the US Department of Homeland Security talks about 16 critical infrastructure sectors, right? Infrastructure sectors where they are so vital that if they're incapacitated or destroyed in some way, they would have a debilitating effect in some way on our community. Either a debilitating effect in terms of security or the economy or personal health or security or safety of our people, right? We want to make sure that those critical infrastructures stay secure. And typically we use isolated networks to help ensure that they stay secure, right? Now, the thing is that even these isolated networks, even these networks that are not attached to the network, to the internet or to the wider security, they are affected by malware. And there's been a number of famous recent attacks on isolated networks. Some of you guys might know of some of these: Shamoon, Triton, Dragonfly, Notpedia, WannaCry. These are infamous attacks on a number of different sectors, including isolated networks, right? Let's just take a look at Triton, for example. With Triton, we had an example where basically they infiltrated isolated networks, took control of vulnerable control systems, and rendered them ineffective. So basically, think about it. You have control systems in place meant to ensure safety, and this Triton malware killed that safety mechanism. So now the very mechanism you're reliant on is ineffective, right? And it basically meant that these critical infrastructures were very vulnerable. They were very vulnerable, right? And so the question becomes, how could it be that you have this isolated network that still got attacked by malware, right? And the answer is, you still have a data transfer issue when you're dealing with isolated networks, right? You have your isolated network, okay, but you still need to get data in there. You have firmware upgrades, you have other types of critical data that need to get into that network, right? So what is the common way that you bring in data into an isolated network? Well, typically you do it with some kind of external media, right? You bring the data in on a CD or a DVD or a thumb drive, et cetera, right? But the challenge is that there is no standard way to transfer that data, right? There's no common industry standard on how you transfer that data. It's a huge challenge. Everybody kind of does it their own way. And the number of threats because of that is rising exponentially. Now, we have a lot of technologies out there. We heard RSA where we're seeing a lot of technologies. There's a lot of technologies out there designed to detect and neutralize malware, but guess what? The malware is constantly evolving. Every time there's a new technology out there, the hackers figure out a way to evolve that malware so that it can circumvent that new technology, right? So it's a constant challenge. And we have a lot of, the government has put out a lot of new compliance mandates, a lot of new ways that we in industry are supposed to comply to make sure that we don't have these malware attacks. But guess what? They don't tell us how to do that, right? They don't tell us how to do it. So this actually adds just another level of stress for our IT organizations. How are we going to meet these compliance mandates and make sure that we don't get attacked by malware, right? And finally, everything I've talked about so far is malware coming into the organization. You also have the additional thing of the data leakage, right? Sensitive data, social security numbers, credit card numbers, driver's license numbers that are on the data and making sure those don't leak out. So these are the challenges that our CISOs and IT organizations of isolated networks are dealing with all the time. Now, what are we going to do about those challenges? Okay, at OPSWAT we have what we call the Meta Defender platform. The Meta Defender platform consists of a number of cutting edge, leading technologies designed to work together seamlessly to ensure that malware doesn't enter your environment. And I mean, there's a number of different technologies here. Just a couple that I want to highlight. Data sanitization, CDR. CDR is the unique ability to take Office documents and other productivity documents like JPEG files, PDFs, etc., deconstruct them, remove components that are the typical malware vectors, components like macros, scripts, URLs, etc., remove them and reconstruct the file so it's still completely usable by you as an end user, but without all those components that are typical malware vectors, okay? A very exciting leading edge technology that OPSWAT is a pioneer in. One of the many examples. Another example, multi-scanning, right? So when I talk about multi-scanning, I talk about antivirus scanning. And we all know that antiviruses, they're pretty good, but they're not 100% effective. In fact, oftentimes, they're not even 75% effective in catching malware, right? There are many, many, many AVs out there. None of them are that great at detecting a malware. Now, the reality is, though, they all have their strengths and weaknesses. And if you can scan with multiple AVs, the chance that you actually catch a larger set of malware increases dramatically. If you can scan with up to 30 AV engines, and I'm talking about industry-leading AVs like Sophos, Symantec, McAfee, et cetera, if you can scan with 30 of them, the chance that you detect malware increases tremendously. We're reaching now like the 99% rate of success, right? Another example of our technology. And finally, like data loss prevention. We have the technology that can identify certain types of data in files, like social security numbers, like driver's license numbers, like credit card information, and either redact it or do something else to manipulate it so that that data doesn't get leaked out, right? So these are all components of the Meta Defender platform. You submit your files to this platform and you can be pretty assured that those files are either going to be flagged as, hey, don't use these because there's something bad. They're going to be either or cleaned of those files, or be told, hey, you can use these files with confidence. They don't contain malware. So the question becomes, okay, you've got this great platform. How do we get the files into that platform, right? I'm in my isolated network. I want to use the Meta Defender platform. How am I going to get the files to be processed by the Meta Defender platform? And the answer to that is, we have what we call our kiosk. Well, you don't see it here, but basically our kiosk, there's a couple of examples. We actually have the kiosk here in the booth. You can come take a look at them afterwards. They let you use any external media, DVDs, USBs, thumb drives, floppy drives, whatever. Scan those files before allowing them into your isolated network. How do you do that? Well, I'm going to show you 3 examples, okay? Some of our customers have this kind of setup. Here's our kiosk. They have the kiosks outside of the critical air-gapped network, the isolated network. The users come in with their external media. They submit the media to the kiosk. The kiosk does all the processing for you, tells you what's good, what's bad. Based on the way you configure it, you can either have the bad files be deleted or quarantined or whatever. And you know that when you pull that thumb drive out, you now have only clean data, and then you walk it into your air-gapped network. And once you're in your air-gapped network, you can put it into the computers that are in that air-gapped network. And you can be assured that that media has only good files, right? That's for one type of situation. Now, you might have another situation that says, Dan, you know what? That looks great, but when I'm in that internal network, I want to know that any thumb drive I put into any of these machines is actually been scanned by the kiosk. How do I know that? Okay, because I have a lot of thumb drives, a lot of media floating around. How do I know which of the media actually got scanned by the kiosk? Well, the answer to that is our second solution, which is same concept, but now every machine in your internal network has what we call Meta Defender Client, a very, very lightweight client. And that client says, okay, I see that the user submitted the external media onto my machine. Before I allow that media to be used, tell me whether it was already processed by the kiosk, right? We have a certification system. So this is an additional layer of security to make sure that that thumb drive or the DVD has actually been scanned, right? And finally, for those people that say, Dan, that looks great, but you know what? I don't even want to have external media in my internal network, right? We have the third solution, which is using the kiosk with what we call Meta Defender Vault. Meta Defender Vault is kind of like Dropbox or Box. It's a file storage system, but it's on premise. It's not in the cloud. Super secure. A lot of security things. You submit your external media to the kiosk. The kiosk transfers that data to the vault. And then from then on, any device that needs to use any files is using it from the vault. You're never dealing with the external media, right? So 3 great ways to make sure that the media that's coming into your air gap network is free of malware. I just want to point out that over 90% of North American nuclear facilities use one of those 3 solutions that I just described. Over 90% of our nuclear plants are secured using the OPSWAT MetaDefender platform. Think about that for a second, okay? In addition to our nuclear facilities, this is Noble Drilling. They have the largest offshore drilling platforms in the world. They use the MetaDefender platform to make sure that any media that needs, any files that need to be applied to any of the machines on these platforms are scanned by the kiosk before they're used on the platform, right? Because you don't want one of these things blowing up. Again, OPSWAT MetaDefender platform is the way they secure that. And then finally, we have things like the Omaha Public Power District, another energy sector organization that uses our solution to ensure that their files are safe.